And once again, fans, we're just moments away from the start of the Emzone Radical Cup Canada presented by Michelin, the first race of the weekend for this series. And we apologize for the delay. We're about 10 minutes behind schedule for the cleanup following the previous race. So the cleanup is ongoing, and that's why you see the line of Radical cars along the pit lane set to come out and do battle. So it will be a 40-minute timed race for the Emzone Radical Cup Canada presented by Michelin. And track seems to be drying fairly nicely. I see patches of blue sky, so fingers crossed we keep going in that direction over the course of the day. The weatherman indicating it should be just like that for the rest of the day. So some heavy overnight rain, but it shouldn't play a factor in this race as the track continues to dry. There still seems to be a few wet spots out there. It just makes it that much more challenging for the drivers in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada when they do take the track. Again, I'm Dave Bradley. Joined with me in the booth is Todd Lewis. And Todd, it's been a fantastic championship over the course of the season for these very unique race cars.
Unique indeed. Open cockpit race cars, lots of aerodynamics on the bodywork. You first glance, you look at them and think, oh, I guess there is a little bit of aerodynamics, but it's really the aerodynamics of these cars really make it fun to drive, and that's the word we hear most often from many of the racers that jump in, either in the Emzone Radical Cup Series for a full season or just a one-off or a select event, is it's a lot of fun to drive. It's also a great teaching and learning tool for drivers as they're trying to advance their careers and move further up the line, get used to cars with more aerodynamics. So a multi-purpose race car that's a lot of fun to drive and makes for a great show here at CTMP.
It is another step in the ladder from karts to cars. And for these drivers, a lot of them did start in karting. But if you see like the open wheel ladder, then they'll go to Formula 1600 and then on to the winged cars from there. If you want to take more of a sports car stream, then Radical Cup Canada is definitely a place you want to do it, because you do learn that aero and you do learn how far you can drive these cars in the corner. It seems to be the harder you push them, the better the cars like it.
And that's something that race car drivers are fond of, is I want to go faster, I want to push a little bit harder. Sometimes you find where the line is and you go over, but that's also part of the learning curve. But once we get these cars out on track, you'll just see how much fun they are, how exciting they are. And you're right, whichever path you wish to choose, whether it's open wheel, whether it's sports cars, Emzone Radical Cup, a great learning opportunity. Or if you want to continue in the Emzone Radical Cup as well, it's a very cost-effective series to be a part of. It's not nearly as expensive as some of the other series to participate in, and teams will succeed and make this their business and continue to do very well for many years.
And once again, we'll get into more of the specifics on the cars and essentially what's under that bodywork. Which, spoiler alert, isn't really much. They're very light, very nimble cars. And you'll see there's some of the fastest cars at the end of the Andretti straightaway here going into turn number 8. They don't look like huge horsepower cars, but man, when they get going, they can carry a load of speed. So you can see the drivers are now buckled in. Helmets on, which is great news. And it looks like 1 minute to go before we're going to send these cars out on track and get things back underway here as part of the Labor Day sprints at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. And we thank you very much for joining us here today. But again, under a little bit of a delay for a cleanup from the previous race, that should be lifted here very shortly. So it appears as though the cleanup is in turn number 4 and some fluid down on the racetrack. So that is the reason for this lengthy delay before sending the next field out, especially for a race. This is the first race of the weekend for the Emzone Radical Cup Canada presented by Michelin. You don't want to send them out when there's fluid down on the track.
Definitely not. Had a good time out on track yesterday with some practice and qualifying to set the grid for today's race that we'll go through. But cars are now moving off pit lane and they will circle around, pit in, and make their way out onto the front straightaway and get us set for the first of 2 Radical Cup Canada races this weekend here at CTMP.
Welcome to Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. I'm Dave Bradley. Joined with me is Todd Lewis as we get set to present the Emzone Radical Cup Canada presented by Michelin. Here is part of the Labor Day sprints and a very tight championship battle in both the Radical Cup Canada and the Masters class here in 2024. And just a couple more events to settle it. So there'll be 2 rounds here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and then a couple races at Circuit Mont Tremblant as well. But Todd, it's been a very, very racy series, and we expect to see more of that here today.
Good championship battle with Kenny Reedman and Owen Clark up at the top of the championship standings. The interesting thing, too, for these radicals today at CTMP, very different conditions than they had in both practice and qualifying yesterday. Sunshine, warm, muggy temperatures. We had some overnight rain. It's a little bit cloudy. Still some damp areas out on track. It'll be very different for these cars to navigate.
And you can see some of the fluid absorbent down on the racetrack. That was from cleanup from a previous class that was out on track, so it delayed the start just a little bit, but it looks like that is all done. We can take you through the starting lineup for the Emzone Radical Cup Canada presented by Michelin. On pole will be the 42 Kenny Reedman. He leads the points in the RCC, and Owen Clark starting second in points. Mark Boyd will roll off in third. Chris Stiles and Daniel Earl round out the top 5. We see our first Masters car, the 07 of Tim Sanderson. He'll start 6th overall. Alana Carter in the 16 will start 7th, and then Brady Clapton in the 77 will start in 8th spot. Matt Graham, Robert Burgess in 9th and 10th. Burgess is the leader in the Masters Championship, but only by 20 points over Tim Sanderson. John Painter, John Sobel, Liang Chu, and Tobias Lutke round out your field here for the starting lineup in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada.
Important on this reconnaissance lap for these drivers to circulate around, get an idea of where some of the damp areas are on this 10-turn circuit here at CTMP. You see one of them right there coming through corner number 10. A little bit of dampness out on the racetrack. They'll be making notes about that mentally as they circulate around here under the caution period behind the safety car.
Yeah, it is more of a reconnaissance lap than a warm-up lap. So yeah, you're trying to get some heat in your Michelin tires and make sure your brakes are up to operating temperature. But as a driver, you're paying attention. There's a puddle there. There's a wet spot there. This is what I want to avoid.
Yep, absolutely. The navigating continues, and as Dave mentioned, a little weaving back and forth. Oh, not through the damp areas. Don't want to weave too much there, but drivers getting a feel of this circuit, and again, very different from yesterday, but will make for an exciting race once we get under green flag conditions, which we're expecting shortly.
And if you're brand new to watching the Emzone Radical Cup Canada Championship and you say these cars look interesting, they are very much so. We'll give you a little idea of the specs behind these cars. So they make about 230 horsepower. Their power is based on a 4-cylinder motorcycle engine, and that's why you'll hear the high revs as they head down the Andretti straightaway here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. 1,340 cc. They only weigh about 1,365 pounds each. That's it. So they are very light, very quick, and very nimble. They have a 6-speed sequential gearbox. Top speed here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, 235 kilometers an hour down this straightaway.
That is a lot of speed at the end of the Mario Andretti straightaway. It makes for a great passing opportunity heading into corner number 8. And we'll see drivers want to use the aerodynamic hole punched by the car ahead of them and then pop out at the last minute trying to make a pass into corner number 8, that right-hander. And there's a couple of other passing opportunities around here as well. Of course, corner number 1, a terrific opportunity. And, well, we've seen it at a few other spots as well, including corner 10.
Take advantage of a driver making a mistake in front of you as the field lines up neatly 2 by 2 behind the Chevrolet Camaro pace car, and this is into turn number 8. Couple more corners and they'll be on the front straightaway, and we will be up to speed. But you can tell the difference between the Radical Cup Canada cars and the Masters cars. The Radical Cup Canada has a black number panel, the Masters with a white number panel. So that's the easiest way to differentiate the two running together here today. Kenny Reedman and Owen Clark, your front row as they head onto the front straightaway. And now in the shadow of the flag stand, the green flag waves, and we're underway here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park.
Look at them spread out 4 wide along the front straight. They'll want to narrow down as they go through corner number 1. Everybody getting through cleanly so far.
Boy, 2 by 2, a lot of it. The top 2 drivers decided to stick nose to tail, and look at the gap they're able to open up in the early going. through turn number 1, now into turn number 2, and look at that grit. You can see the speedy dry still there on the inside. A couple drivers decided to try and take advantage of that and found out how slippery it is in the early going.
Yeah, very slippery conditions. You can see the front wheels wobbling around just a little bit as you're coming through a couple of those corners, but everybody getting strung out. It looks like single file right now, everything moving smoothly on this first lap.
Chris Stiles is that blue and white car sitting in third spot, and he's closed the gap on Owen Clark. Again, it was open to about 5 car lengths off the initial drop of the green, but it didn't take long for that 7 car to muster up a whole head of steam, and now he's in the draft down the Andretti straightaway.
We talked about being cautious in the opening laps because of the damp areas. Chris Stiles took advantage of it, knowing where he might be able to improve his position. Did, now running third before the completion of lap number 1, and has sights set on moving forward a little further.
Maybe everybody was just a little bit cautious here in the first lap at speed in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada Championship race. In a battle there is for 4th spot, and give it to the 39 of Daniel Earl as he slides by, and here comes Sanderson as well trying to take advantage. So these cars, while they do have a lot of horsepower and very lightweight, they're still very much a momentum-based race car. So if you see 2 cars battling, it's really going to cost them real estate on the track.
Which is a momentum-based race car is very suitable here at CTMP. It's a flow track. You want to maintain that speed. You don't want to slow down, and we've got one that's gotten turned around. That's the 39 of Daniel Earl. Looped it around, but keeps going in the right direction.
Grabs a gear, and no harm, no foul, other than the fact he lost significant spots on the running order. So Daniel Earl, who had just made a pass for 4th spot, got into that slippery section in turn number 2, so it really still hasn't been fully dusted off, and goes for a loop, but a fairly high-speed loop in turn number 2. Not a place you want to do that too often.
So in the early going, we have seen both drivers take advantage of the damp conditions and maybe being a little bit cautious. Others have been able to move forward, and also it will bite you every now and again. A little bit slippery. Daniel Earl spins around, reorients himself, gets in gear, loses a couple of spots, but now continues on.
And we can see just in behind the 16 of Alana Carter, and Alana sporting a new sponsor on board her Radical car this weekend, with Oro Station backing that team. So a new agreement with a brand new race facility in this area just north of the GTA.
The building of that facility continues. It's a members facility. They're getting more memberships. It's really interesting, and give a lot of credit to Alana Carter, who is a young woman from Western Canada who did some dirt racing, packed up and moved to the Toronto area to further her career, and she's participated in some European events and was running the full season in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada. You can see her improvement and progress this year as well.
Great attitude too. She always has a smile on her face no matter what kind of car she gets into. She's always excited to be behind the wheel of a race car for sure. Reedman still leads Owen Clark 2nd place by about half a second that last time across the stripe, and we can give you an idea of the track conditions as they sit right now. You can see still some patches of wet, but the drivers are still off what would be their fast time. So qualifying yesterday, the quickest time was laid down by the 42 of Kenny Reedman with a 1:20.254. Right now, his quickest time is a 1:26.309. So that just gives you an idea of how careful they still need to be to avoid a spin.
You would expect a little bit of a slowdown from qualifying pace to race pace with a little more fuel, and understanding you want to conserve those Michelin tires to last you in peak performance for the duration of the race, but that's a pretty significant drop off in speed. But no slowdown in the competitive nature of the Emzone Radical Cup. Good battles throughout this field. We're on the 16 of Alana Carter now, who has her sights set on the 77 of Brady Clapham right ahead of her.
That's about half a second difference between those two drivers. Clapham in the 77, again, one of those drivers making the graduation from go-karts into race cars in his first season here in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada. In the Emzone backed number 77 just ahead, and they're trailing the number 12 of Mark Boyd, who is currently in the 4th spot. So that is almost a 3-way battle. It won't take much for those two drivers to catch the 12 just ahead.
Brady Clapham doing a lot of racing this year. He's running some sports car events as well, and I talked to him a little bit earlier in the year, and he was excited about both. This season was the first time he had stepped into and sat in a Radical Cup car, and it was a bit of a learning curve. curve. He found the adaptation to the sports car a little bit easier, but anytime you get seat time, it's good for young racers.
Very much so. You saw the lead by Kenny Reedman, which really isn't that big, over Owen Clark in the 55, who was running in second, and Chris Stiles in third. And those three drivers have been able to separate themselves from this battle, which is nearly three-way. But there is Reedman with Clark in his shadow onto the front straightaway one more time. Reedman leads the point standings, but realistically not by much. He's got 4 wins on the season so far. 246 points he's managed to accumulate, but Clark, with 3 wins in 2024, sits at 239 points. So that's how close it is coming into this race.
This is a championship battle that will go down to the final rounds at Mont Tremblant later on in September. But we've seen these two battle all season long, no different here. And it seems as if we've settled in the early going. Everyone's sort of focused on, all right, where's my car better than the driver ahead of me? Where's the opportunity that I might be able to gain position? But that 42 of Kenny Reedman seems to be trying to pull out a bit of a gap now in the 55.
And a reminder, this is a 40-minute timed race, so not necessarily counting laps at this point, and there's still 30 minutes left to go. So we are still in the infancy of this race realistically. So that's the beauty of these Michelin tires, is you can push them hard, and then you can back off a little bit, let them cool down, and then go for another push again.
Seems as if Chris Stiles in that 7 car has settled down just a little bit as well, settled in, try to develop a bit of a rhythm and let those two front runners maybe burn each other out a little bit and be able to take advantage later on. Then looking at the battle just behind, Mark Boyd, Brady Clapham, and Atlanta Carter, the top 6 as the 16 goes through. And again, a little bit of a gap has managed to eke out from Mark Boyd ahead of the 77 Clapham and then Atlanta Carter in his shadow.
And you can see these cars are drawing a line around the racetrack, and that's what happens with the aero especially. It pulls the moisture, and the floor of these cars pulls the moisture off the racing surface and makes for better traction, obviously, but you can still see some moisture areas, especially on the entrance into turn number 10 coming onto the front straightaway. Still a very wet patch there, so the drivers do have to be very careful.
And it's amazing how quickly that track is drying. Only a handful of laps down in the first 10 minutes of this Emzone Radical Cup Canada race, and you can already see the drier line starting to form, and it will continue. And again, that will be the evolution of the race car, how it handles a little bit differently as we go through the 40 minutes. The drying line on the racetrack, the performance will pick up and improve. And again, it creates opportunities late in the race.
Now, what you don't want to do is put 2 wheels out onto the grass, because that grass is saturated, and that'll make for a tricky turn the next time you go to lean on it for sure. So the drivers have to be careful in this. Still the early going is Kenny Reedman in the 42. There's a good shot of your overall race leader. He currently is out in front in the Radical Cup Canada Championship, out in front in this race as well. And looking back for the Masters battle, and it is still Tim Sanderson. He's 11th on track, but he is just a fraction of a second ahead of the 2 of Robert Burgess. Burgess comes in as your points leader. Sanderson needs to gain those valuable points, but at this point, just 1 spot ahead of the 2 on the racetrack.
As you look closely, you can really see how hard these drivers are pushing through some of the corners as well. Yes, it looks like a smooth straight line if you're at a bit of a distance, but when you look closely, you can see that car is bouncing ever so slightly going through the corners, meaning the drivers are trying to push and gather as much speed as they can.
Yeah, and if you look at the lap times, the best time now put down by Kenny Reedman is into the 1:23, so still about 3 seconds off where he was in qualifying. As you see, there's Tim Sanderson, the leader in the Masters class in the 07. That white number panel gives you an indication of the drivers in the Masters class, but I was going to say lap times of Kenny Reedman, 1:23 now, which it was 1:26 at the start of this race. So yeah, they're starting to chew into it just a little bit.
Yes, as the circuit continues to dry out, the performance will improve, and yes, that's a good battle between the 30 and the 07 now. Matt Graham and Tim Sanderson, as you mentioned, Sanderson leading in the Masters class ahead of the 2 of Robert Burgess.
And the 30 is actually with a white number panel on it, so that is the leader in the Masters class. So Matt Graham also jumping into them. So that's a car normally campaigned by Stephen Chen, who normally runs in the Radical Cup Canada Championship, but today campaigned by Matt Graham in the Masters class. So this is a battle for top spot in the Masters class here today. between these two cars. And again, a little bit further down the overall running order, 10th and 11th on track, but there is no difference between the cars. We should mention this as well. It's just essentially the age of the drivers. So it's you don't want to call it a gentleman class because these drivers are still fiery competitors, but they might be a little bit more advanced in age.
Just age, yes, but the lack of competitiveness does not dissipate as they age through. It's just, again, competing against your peers, we'll call it.
And Sanderson, we've seen him, if you're a fan of Canadian motorsport, he's been here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park in just about any type of vehicle. He long campaigned in the Porsche GT3 Cup and then found a home here in the Radical Cup Championship Series. And yeah, he's having a fantastic season so far here in 2024. As a matter of fact, 5 wins and 6 podiums in 7 races. But despite that on-track record, again, comes into this one second place.
Back up front with the number 42, the leader of Kenny Reedman, who has managed to pull out a bit of a gap right now on the second place runner in 55 of Owen Clark. It's up over 3 seconds. I'm not sure if Clark had an issue or if Reedman has just been super fast. You see him in the distance there, but that is a bit of a gap that Kenny Reedman has pulled out just 14 minutes into this 40-minute race.
Yeah, so Chris Stiles still in the 1:23.7. He actually just turned his fastest lap of the race, but losing a bit of ground to the top 2 of Kenny Reedman and Owen Clark. But still tight-knit group of cars in the mid-pack here as Mark Boyd, Brady Clapham, Lana Carter, and Daniel Earl, 4th through 7th, not too far apart. So there's a good look at the 55 of Owen Clark. He continues, and you can see there isn't a lot of, and this is why it's a good stepping stone from go-karts into race cars, because there's not a lot of suspension, and they're very bouncy cars. So what you would feel in a race car, you would feel a lot in this Radical car as well.
The suspension and the aerodynamics work to your advantage and give you a great learning curve as you're trying to improve and make your way through. As we're watching the 55 of Owen Clark, who is trying to maintain and maybe cut into that gap a little bit from the leader, Kenny Reedman, in the 42 right now. It was just up over 3 seconds the last time around as Owen Clark continues to circulate, and that gap continues to increase as Kenny Reedman is posting pretty consistent times in the low 122s, and Owen Clark's last lap just a little over 123. So that gap increasing once again, but again, still very early going with 15 and a half minutes gone. That gap we'll expect to shrink up a little bit later on as drivers, as the handling characteristics of the cars change a little bit over the span of this race. Just because it's 3 or 4 seconds now doesn't mean it won't be tight later on.
And you know what? For Kenny Reedman, soon he'll be into lap traffic towards the latter stages of this race. That will play a role because the drivers have to now watch their mirrors and see what's happening as you take a look at a battle a little bit deeper in the field. That is Lang Chu in the number 3 to the inside. And James Michelin is in the 17, the Gulf liveried Radical, poking to the outside, decides to follow single file through there. John Sobel in the yellow, blue, and white, number 70, just in behind.
And look at that. Again, these Radicals so competitive wherever you're looking in the field. This battle a little further back with Lang Chu, McLean, and John Sobel. But again, mixing it up, dicing it up. The characteristics of the cars very similar. So it's strictly driver skill, driver racecraft that is going to benefit you in your success.
All 3 of these drivers racing in the Masters class. And so these are all 4 positions on the racetrack. So that's the thing is you're trying to gain as many spots as you can on the racetrack, but some of them may not matter as much as others. All 3 of those positions matter to those drivers.
Back up front with the leader, and that gap continues to be significant between the 42 of Kenny Reedman and the 55 of Owen Clark. Not surprising to see Reedman fast. He was very quick here at the first 2 races of the season at CTMP and on the May long weekend. Looked like he was going to score a victory in race number 1. Unfortunately, he got tangled up with some traffic late in the race and it went away. Redemption the next day, though. He did score the victory in race number 2.
And we talk about the progression from karts to cars, and Kenny Reedman has done that, but he had a long stint in between where he dropped off 2 wheels and went superbike racing, both here in Canada and down in the U.S. with great success. And then the thing about when you age in superbike racing, it's almost a self-preservation thing. You want to get a cage. When you age, you get a cage, and essentially that's why he's jumped into this. Number 42. As a 32-year-old, he has had great success in the Radical Cup Canada. No championships yet, but most points in series history coming into the season.
But enjoying it and loving it, and if you have the chance to talk to him, if you're around on the circuit, it's a smile on his face that you see when talking about the competition and the fun that he's having participating in the Emzone Radical Cup.
Yeah, and there you can see the number 7 Purity Gas-backed entry of Chris Stiles. Just the one podium in 2023, the 40-year-old stepping on the podium twice here in 2024 already, and very tight in points with the 12 of Mark Boyd. So Stiles comes into this one 5th in points and just 2 markers behind Boyd in the 12. So they're having quite a battle in the Purity Gas camp.
So look at the 9 of John Painter and the 22 of Travis Hill. Travis Hill, who's had some pretty good success racing in the Radical Cup Canada Series, as well as trying to look for a way around that number 9 car as they circulate on the back part of the course now. And maybe as he gets lined up for the long Mario Andretti straightaway, he'll try to use that aerodynamic advantage, getting in the draft and popping out at the last minute. I'm not sure he's going to be close enough, though.
One of the main differences on that 9 car, you'll see, have a look at that end plate on the wing. You'll see Canadian flags on most of these cars. You'll see an Australian flag on the number 9 of John Painter. So the only driver campaigning in this series from Australia as will hit the halfway mark for your race leader, the 42 of Kenny Reedman. And again, he cuts into his fast lap time of the race. Now down into the 122 flat. Owen Clark is picking up the pace as well, but now 6.3 seconds back of your race leader. So Clark's really got to get moving or hope for a rare mistake by the driver of the 42, Kenny Reedman.
Tough time in the race for some of these drivers who've had the gap pull out on them, whether it's Owen Clark or whether it's Chris Stiles, who's another few seconds behind Owen Clark in the 3rd spot right now, is trying to maintain that pace, trying to improve your position and not having that car directly ahead of you and understanding that's who I'm chasing. That's when the driver really has to focus, hit their marks, get the maximum performance out of the car. It'll be the team on the radio that tells you, yes, you improved. Yes, you cut into that lead just a little bit. But if you've got a 4, 5, 6 second gap, it's difficult to see that out on the racetrack. So your team will be your motivator here.
The gap is only a couple tenths between these two drivers of Liang Chu in the 3 and the 17 of James McLean, as McLean again takes a peek to the inside. And yeah, the difference is not very much for these drivers. They're racing in 13th, 14th, and 15th with John Sobel just in behind. And I think Sobel might be just a spectator in this battle just ahead as McLean went through that speedy dry. You saw a cloud of dust kick up. So trying to find a new way around. He's tired of chasing the number 3.
I think we'll call it a 3-way fight now as John Sobel has closed up as the 2 in front of him were shifting and moving around just a little bit. And that's what the drivers will do as well, is making sure that you're noticed by the driver ahead of you that you're trying to pass. Move from the left side, driver's left, to driver's right. Fill the mirrors is the expression. And if you're doing that, you're taking the driver's attention away from the racetrack ahead of them, and maybe there's a mistake that happens.
And again, you're watching race number 1 of the Labor Day Sprints at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park for the Emzone Radical Cup Canada, presented by Michelin. I'm Dave Bradley. Joined with me in the booth is Todd Lewis, and Kenny Reedman in the 42 is your race leader. He has been since the drop of the green with a gap of about 7.5 seconds out in front of the field. And there you have a good look at the number 30 of Matt Graham, along with the 07 of Tim Sanderson. That is the battle for top spot in the Masters class. So the drivers a little bit older, so they have to be 40 years old or older to race in the Masters Championship. And you can tell the difference in the cars based on the white number panel. White number panel, black numbers. The Radical Cup Canada cars have a black number panel with white numbers.
And Tim Sanderson just went quickest in his last lap with a 1:23.4, trying to close that gap up on Matt Graham ahead of him. It's been a good battle for those two through the first half of this race. It's been very tight nose to tail, and right now Tim Sanderson is looking for a way around the 30.
Yeah, I think Tim Sanderson's going to see the back of that number 30 of Matt Graham in his sleep here tonight, as John Sobel now has closed the gap on the 3. So at some point, the 17 of James Michelin did manage to get around, and there you can see opening up a significant gap over the 3 of Liang Chu. And here comes your race leader, the black and red number 42 of Kenny Reedman is your overall race leader. He has a significant cushion in behind him, but he's now looking at the back end of lap traffic.
And that's why Reedman will have been happy to build up that 7.5-second gap between himself and the second place runner out there, the 55 of Owen Clark, because now he can take his time and not have to force his way through lap traffic. Look for the best opportunity to pass. These drivers ahead of him will be getting blue flags indicating that there are faster cars coming behind him. But it doesn't mean they're going to pull over and wave him by. He'll have to navigate his way through. Now you're getting a look at that gap with the 55 running in second place.
In true sports car fashion as well, you can see the high beams flicker on the 42 of Kenny Reedman. So he just wants to alert the driver ahead that faster cars are coming. So if they don't see the blue flag, hopefully they'll see the flicker of the high beam. And look at Chu pulling way out to the outside. So that is good sportsmanship there. Just popping out of the way of the leader, letting Kenny Reedman go on his way. And they're going to resume that battle there. Sobel and Chu, once again, still nose to tail.
Again, understanding who you're racing with in the Masters division. Kenny Reedman is not part of that, so they're giving him room to make his way around on the racetrack and then very quickly resume that battle in the Masters class.
And Reedman's next car up in line will be the 17 of McLean, but he's got a little bit of time to get there. And we've talked about the changing track conditions, the weather, sort of a factor in the early going here. We had a significant rainstorm overnight. The track was, for the most part, dry when the drivers took off. They are on slick tires, so no treaded tires for the Michelin shod cars here today. But you can still see some patches of moisture, and they are coming into play just a little bit, eliminating some passing zones for these drivers.
You can see as Kenny Reedman was getting wide coming through the corner there as well. Some of those painted curbs will be a little slick because of the dampness as well. That's something you'll want to be aware of as you're making your way around the track. The battle continues between the 3 and the 17. James McLean ahead of Liang Chu and John Sobel in there as well.
There is second place. That is Owen Clark. Again, Clark coming into this one second in the championship, but really not by much. 7 points adrift of the points leader, Kenny Reedman, who has a lock on the field at this point, almost 9 seconds out in front of this driver, the 55 of Owen Clark, who has had, you know what, by all intents and purposes, he's had a great season in that 55. 3 wins so far in 2024, 6 podiums in 7 events.
I think you would classify that as a great season, but Kenny Reedman as well has also been on a run with 3 consecutive victories now, going back to the races in Toronto as well. Had himself a good weekend in Toronto and took advantage of that to jump in and hold on to that championship lead. But 4 rounds to go, including this one. We'll go right down to the end of the Emzone Radical Cup Canada Series.
And now you can see Clark coming up on his teammate, John Sobel. They operate out of the same tent in the paddock area. Sobel running in the Masters class. Clark obviously second overall and in the Radical Cup Championship. But Clark is one of the drivers who represents the future of motorsport, not only here in Radical Cup Canada championship standings, but just in motorsports in general. Just 21 years old, and he's one of those great talents that's just starting to realize his potential.
21 is a very interesting age because now he's getting great experience in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada. And as we talked earlier, you'll be able to choose the path. Do you want to choose an open wheel path? Is there an opportunity there for you to pursue that as we're looking at the battle between the 3 and the 55? The 55, the second place runner, Owen Clark, getting through that lap traffic pretty smoothly. But do you want to pursue an open wheel path, or is it sports cars? And the Emzone Radical Cup Canada is a great opportunity to gain experience and then choose the path for your future.
Well, he earned this full-time ride here in 2024. He finished 4th in points last year, but didn't run the first 3 events of the season. And when he did run, he finished with 3 podiums and a win on the streets of Toronto, which is a very daunting and difficult place. So yeah, the 21-year-old jumped behind the wheel and immediately was comfortable in these race cars.
And that's sometimes what racers will do as well. It's I have a one-off opportunity, as he did a year ago in Toronto. You get a taste of it. You get an understanding of the series, how it operates. You get familiar with the series staff and the rest of the competitors and understand what it's going to take to be successful in the series. Was able to put a full season together, has been successful this year, is in a championship fight, and hopefully that leads to even more success.
Here's a good look at the 7 of Chris Stiles as we move our way through the field. Stiles is closing the gap a little bit on the 55 of Owen Clark. He's about 5 seconds further back. He still has to make his way through the lap traffic, but his teammate, the 12 of Mark Boyd, in there as well. So Mark sitting 4th in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada running order at this point. So Reedman leads Clark, Stiles, and Boyd, and then 5th place is this car, the 77 of Brady Clapham. And again, another youngster just at 17 years old coming into this season.
Who's taken advantage of opportunities here in the race after starting in the 8th position, has moved himself up into the top 5 now. And that's what you want to see from a young driver as well, who's able to pick up some positions, gain positions during the race, as Brady Clapham has, getting some teaching from a pretty good instructor in Jonathan Woolridge this weekend, who of course had that perfect season in the Emzone Radical Cup a few years ago, started every race on pole, won every race.
So I was going to say, you said pretty good. I was going to say pretty dominant, as Jonathan Woolridge really did well in these cars before furthering his career. So he did start to climb the ladder into the LMP3 ranks, whereas he's had pretty good success there as well. So it gives you an idea of the training ground that is this series.
Absolutely. Has run some VP Racing Fuels events this year, is looking to do some more events before the end of the season as well, and is having conversations about 2025 already. So yes, you've seen the proving ground of the Emzone Radical Cup Canada can help vault drivers further in their career.
Boy, Stiles going a little bit wide on the exit of turn number 2, and I think that is a result of that speedy drive that is still down. You can still see a little bit of the grit and dirt on the inside of turn number 2. Now, normally the cars do like to sort of keep that maintaining, or the outside arc, try and carry that momentum through turn number 2, but it seems they're doing it just a little bit further out to avoid that cleanup that we had from a previous race that was on track before the start of the Emzone Radical Cup Canada presented by Michelin.
Great job by all of these drivers. 30 minutes into this race now. We started under damp conditions, very different conditions than they experienced in practice and qualifying. But once we got going, it has been green from start to finish. We have seen some good battles in both the Masters class and the overall championship. Kenny Reedman, as we're looking at right now, is out in front with a very comfortable lead over the 55 of Owen Clark. But some good racing throughout this field, as we've come to expect.
Now Reedman and the Reedman management number 42 has been picture perfect so far in this race. For the first 10 minutes has opened up a gap of about 12 seconds over second place Owen Clark, and Clark is starting to chip into the fast time that's laid down by Kenny Reedman. So 1:21.6 still isn't quite where he was in the beautiful sunshine during qualifying a day ago. But the wet track is no longer realistically a factor. You've got some heat in those Michelin tires and everything is functioning properly.
I think if you improve your time by about 5 seconds, I think that's pretty substantial change in trajectory throughout the race. But it's been a perfect day for Kenny Reedman, as you mentioned. Has himself a nice gap. That's the 55 of Owen Clark that is currently running in second. And again, just trying to move forward as best he can, and also has himself a pretty good lead over the third place runner of Chris Stiles in the 7th.
Well, I saw a quick flash of the number 2, the red car, driven by Robert Burgess, and we should mention 12th on track in the group, and he appears to be 3rd in the Masters class at this point. He came into this one as your points leader in the Masters class, but just 20 points up on Tim Sanderson, who sits one position further ahead. 11th on track, but will be 2nd in the Masters class.
Again, that's an opportunity. If Tim Sanderson can finish ahead, that'll tighten that championship battle up in the Masters class. That championship fight also will go down to the final rounds this year.
2nd place in the points. 2nd place on track is the 55 of Owen Clark as he continues to work through some lap traffic. And James McLean just ahead. Here's a good battle in the Masters class, and one we've been watching realistically for the last 15 minutes, I think, on track. It's the 3 of Lang Chu in the the Martini liveried car, the retro throwback sort of look to that number 3 car, and the 70 of John Sobel. And again, these two very, very close on best lap times and average lap times. They've been covered by a blanket pretty much the whole way.
Yep, John Sobel back in this weekend. He is doing everything he can to disrupt Lang Chu ahead of him and try to force him into a bit of a bobble or a bit of a mistake in one of the corners, and then hopefully be able to take advantage. You'll see him moving from side to side, and he is doing what he can to disrupt Lang Chu, but he is focused eyes forward right now and having a very good battle with John Sobel for 15 or 20 minutes.
He tried to throw it in turn number 5 and make that pass stick. It didn't, but now he'll be able to catch that draft down this straightaway. There's also a battle just ahead. You saw the 2 cars nose to tail. That is Brady Clapham and Alana Carter, 5th and 6th on track. So they too have had sort of a 30-minute going concern here in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada Championship.
Keeping an eye on this fight between the 3 and the 70 of Chu and Sobel, and they continue nose to tail through 8, 9, and headed towards 10. I don't know that Sobel is going to be close enough to maybe make an opportunity in corner number 1, but this is an illustration as well that battles will go on lap after lap. Sometimes a pass takes quite some time to set up for these drivers. It may happen at, for instance, corner number 10, but it starts much further back at corner number 5. If you can get up close to a driver as you get through corner number 5, A and B, and then out onto the long straightaway, take advantage of that draft that Dave mentioned. Wasn't able to last time, but Sobel will be looking for another opportunity. Back up front now with the leader, Kenny Reedman.
Skies are getting lighter, too. You can see that in that shot as Kenny Reedman in the 42 makes his way through turn number 8 and 9 and through the final turn before hitting the front straightaway. Now with about 5 minutes left to go here in this Radical Cup Canada Championship race. Race number 1 for this series here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Kenny Reedman leading in the Radical Cup Canada class. You can see the black number panel, white numbers indicating the different series. 2 series racing amongst each other. The cars look very similar. There's a good look at Mark Boyd, 4th on track right now in the Purity Gas-backed number 12. And again, Boyd just a little bit behind his teammate Chris Stiles, who sits in 3rd, that final podium position in the Radical Cup Canada Championship. Daniel Earl in the 39, who sits in 8th place overall, is the leader in the Masters class. Again, you can tell the difference with the white number panel, black numbers on the Masters class. Daniel Earl going for a spin in the early going. It's settled into the mid-pack, but still ahead of the rest of the Masters combatants. And the 39 is well ahead of his nearest competitor, but we've had some significant battles deeper in the field, and here you can see one shaping up between the 2 of Robert Burgess, and James McLean has managed to catch that driver. So McLean was sort of mired in traffic a little bit in that Gulf livery number 17, but he's caught up to that Oro station back number 2 of Robert Burgess. And why is that significant? Because Burgess is your points leader in the Masters class coming into this race. And so he needs every position he can get to keep Sanderson from taking over the points lead in race number 1 here at the Labor Day Sprints. And he will do just that, but again, we're coming into the final few minutes of this 40-minute timed race, about 3.5 minutes left to go. So I believe we'll be seeing the white flag the next time Kenny Reedman comes through to click off his lap. But again, this is a battle deeper in the field, 12th and 13th on track, but it is battle for position in the Masters class between James McLean and Robert Burgess. So it's one of the closest battles we've got on track right now. As McLean takes a look in turn number 5, and again, he has been coming. So pretty much lap after lap, we can tell you that the last time by the 17 was about 2 seconds a lap faster than the 2 of Robert Burgess. There is your overall race leader, Kenny Reedman, in the 42 as he crosses the stripe one more time, and 2.5, almost 3 minutes to go. So we'll do a few more before we see that white flag shown to the field as Reedman now well out in front of the 55 of Owen Clark, who was keeping him honest in the early going of this race. And Clark now 19 seconds back of the 42 of Kenny Reedman. But Clark continues to chip away at his fastest time. As a matter of fact, just now sets his fastest lap of the race down in the 1:22.2 area. But you can see the track is still a little bit tricky because that's still a couple seconds off what they put down in their qualifying effort, the bright sunshine warm track from a day ago. And that's the difficulty. You set the car up for some track conditions, and then Mother Nature just splashes some water on it, changes everything. No rubber down on the track anymore. It was all washed away overnight from a heavy rainstorm. And these drivers came out to tricky track conditions, but everybody managed to stay relatively straight. Just a minor spin from Daniel Earl. No harm, no foul, as he was able to keep going, and as a matter of fact, sits in 8th spot, still leading in the Masters class here in the 39 car. There is Reedman once again onto the front straightaway in the 42 car. And again, still a comfortable gap out in front, and right now pretty much on cruise control. He's a few tenths off what would be considered his fastest lap of the race. And you can see now Styles in the 7 is into that battle between the 2 of Robert Burgess and the 17 of McLean. So Styles has managed to get around McLean. He still hasn't passed the 2 of Burgess, and here comes Mark Boyd. So that's a dice for the final podium position between this car, the blue and black number 7 of Chris Styles, and the black and red number 12 of Mark Boyd. So that would be for the final podium. Styles has it right now, but Boyd is very much within striking distance with lap cars involved, so they could play a role. Burgess is watching his mirrors for the 7 of Chris Styles, who's trying to make his way by in turn number 3. Boyd still has to do the same thing past the 17 of James McLean. But again, the top 2 are very much spread out. This could come down to a dice for the final step on the podium here in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada Championship, presented by Michelin. There is your overall race leader, the 42 of Kenny Reedman. Reedman off of 10 for the final time, or for one more time, I should say, is the white flag shown. One more lap to go for your overall race leader, the 42 of Kenny Reedman, with a sizable gap back to second place, Owen Clark, and he can pretty much put it on cruise control. He can tiptoe his way through turn number 2. You can see that corner is getting cleaned up with each and every passing lap from that earlier speedy drive put down. Now through turn number 3. There's Owen Clark, now just entering turn number 2. So it gives you an idea of the gap and the sizable gap that he's built up. We talk about 19 seconds. Well, that's what it looks like. It's about 2 corners here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park for Kenny Reedman, the lead that he's managed to build up over the youngster, the 55 of Owen Clark. Reedman looking to build on his points lead here in 2024. Styles in the 7, still holds down 3rd. And I believe he's got a comfortable enough gap on the 12 of Mark Boyd. Boyd has managed to maneuver his way through that lap traffic, but back up at the front, the 42 of Kenny Reedman will ease his way through the S's into turn number 9, now 10, and onto the front straightaway. And this is where he will see the checkered flag. Kenny Reedman started on pole, and he will pick up his 5th win of 2024 and extend his points lead in the Emzone Radical Cup Canada Championship. Owen Clark now following him through onto the front straightaway, and Owen Clark will come home on the second step of the podium. The youngster once again trying to keep pace with the points leader, but he'll lose a little bit of ground. And how about Styles? A charmed race for the driver of the 7 will pick up his 3rd podium of 2024, finishing just ahead of his teammate in the 12, Mark Boyd. Brady Clapham will come through and round out the top 5, but great race out in front. And in the Masters class, the 39 of Daniel Earl will take home the win, followed by Tim Sanderson in the 07 and Robert Burgess in the 2. Will hold on But there is your Masters class winner, the 39 of Daniel Earl. Had a moment in the early going of this race, a spin in turn number 2, but he gathered it back up, kept it off any sort of tire wall, even didn't go into the grass. It was right around here. He just used that paved runoff area. A quick spin for the 39, and Daniel Earl, who's a rookie in this series here in 2024, comes with some experience from other series and down racing in the U.S. and uses that to his advantage here today. Daniel Earl will pick up the win at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Once again, for Todd Lewis, I'm Dave Bradley. Thank you very much for joining us for the Emzone Radical Cup Championship. Big congratulations to Kenny Reedman, the overall winner and the winner in the Radical Cup Championship. And a big congratulations to Daniel Earl in the 39, the winner in the Masters class here today. So the field coming down into the paddock area. And coming up next will be the Nissan Sentra Cup. So we'll bring Pat Gonzalez back into the booth and bring that race to you. So that'll be another fun one. It's very much a momentum race, and those cars often very, very tight for the duration of the time they are on the track. So as the Radical Cup cars clear off the racing surface, you can see the Nissan Sentra Cup cars ready and waiting to do battle as part of the Labor Day sprints here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park.
Pat Gonzalez back in the announcer's booth here at the bottom of the event center overlooking turns 9 and 10 as we prepare to go with our third race of the morning. If you've just joined us, we welcome you to the Labor Day weekend sprint.